Welcome to Lead Poison.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Lead Poison podcast, brought to you by youcanpaint.com.au. Please head to youcanpaint.com.au for issue 1 of their how-to series, How to Paint Your House and Save Thousands. Today's show is also brought to you by Hype Magazine. Hype Magazine is Australia's first full-colour graffiti publication. Special edition reprints are now available at www.originalbootlegs.bigcartel.com. My name is Jack, your host, and this evening on the show we are joined by the New York City graffiti king, COPE2. COPE2 and hip-hop were born in the same suburb and only years apart. In the world of graffiti, there are a handful of writers who played an influential role in the evolution of the culture. COPE2 is one of those people. His dedication to the art form over many decades has led him to a life as a world-renowned artist, but in the beginning, COPE2's art was about as raw as it gets. Throughout the 80s, 90s and beyond, the graffiti culture exploded in New York City and across the globe. The whole world was changing. Artists from every corner were recreating what had begun in the train yards of the Big Apple, the capital of the world, the city so nice they named it twice, the city that never sleeps. Only a few years removed from the very beginnings of this powerful movement, COPE2 witnessed what the rest of us can only fantasize about. I've been fortunate enough to chat with many of my childhood heroes on this show, none more so than COPE2, Kings Destroy. To see some of his current work, please head to www.cope2artlife.com. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and if you feel inclined, please leave us a rating on whatever platform you're using. Without any further delay, please welcome COPE2.
So tell me, man, I guess the first question I want to ask you, and, I don't like to hammer on about this type of thing because I think at this point everyone's sick of it, but I've heard that New York's pretty crazy at the moment, in terms of the pandemic and the response to the pandemic. How are things over there? Is it rough? Is it life as usual, or what's going on?
I don't really pay mind to it. You know what I'm saying? I just live my life normal. I'm not going to be scared and petrified about the COVID this, COVID that. You got to be, aware and protect yourself. I got my shots, but, it's too much sometimes. It's been a little over a year now, and it's like they got everybody going crazy, and who knows if it's true or not. Could be just some government bullshit. And to have everybody stressed out, for the crazy shit they're really doing behind doors. You know what I'm saying? And then who knows, man? It's just I'm sure COVID is real. Yeah, I've had a few friends that died from it, but it's just I think they took it and they're using it to scare the world. But it's probably gone. Who knows? It's probably gone, and they still trying to hang on to it to take advantage of the situation in the sense that they can make all this medication for it, sell it, make money. In the end of the day, it's a business. Everything's business. You're a walking business. Your life, your business, period. You got to pay taxes, everything. You got to pay where you live. You got to pay rent. You got to buy food. When you die, they got to pay to bury you, cremate you. Everything's a fucking business, man. That's just life. And that's what it is. If you got no knowledge, no school, no nothing, you're fucked. No credit, you're fucked. It's like, it's the way it is in the end of the day, so you got to try to stay out of the system, because the system will fuck you hard. You can't try to stay away from going to prison. It's a lot of shit, man. The government run shit. In the end of the day, they're the mob.
Yeah, fuck, 100%, man. I've been talking to a lot of graffiti artists sort of through the pandemic, and I've noticed that I guess they've already dealt with sort of this distrust of the government. So they've dealt personally pretty well with the pandemic in terms of just being able to stay in the studio or just continue their art, man. I think it really helped a lot of artists to deal with the stresses of the pandemic a lot.
Yeah, it helped me big time. Like, painting a lot in the studio. New York went crazy. Like, so many new graffiti writers came out doing throw-ups everywhere. It's insane, what they did. Like, they just destroyed the streets so hard. It's crazy. Like, I heard so many graffiti writers getting arrested and police even letting them go. They didn't even want to deal with bringing them in. Or if they did bring them in, they got released at the desk. 2 hours, they get a ticket, because the system is, fucked up too. They're scared of the COVID police, a lot of police and I know people that work in the correctional facility. They don't even want to go to work. So the jails, the inmates are going crazy in there because, they're fucked up in a place where there's so much germs in the prison, so many people so close, so many germs. You could get sick in there really fast and die, and who knows, man. So, you see shit on TV, people in prison flipping out a lot, man, and it's crazy.
Yeah, man, I've heard that people that are incarcerated have been going through a pretty bad time through the pandemic. What about, the streets of New York? Has it changed sort of in terms of the level of danger that's around? I mean, is it just sort of, have you noticed a change in the amount of maybe bad behavior that's been happening, or has it just been sort of the same?
I mean, kind of the same, man. Nothing changes. No, life is just the same. People think it does. People still getting shot, killed, robbed. It's just life, man. It's sad because a lot of people getting shot. These young kids are wilding out. They always got something to prove all over the world, especially in the States, packing guns, shooting people. Nobody fights fair anymore. Everybody wants to pull out and shoot you right away. It's ridiculous, man. It's just beyond. I moved 2 hours away from the city, from the Bronx, up north, where the farms and all that, because if I stay there, I'm going to kill someone or they're going to kill me because I can't tolerate the bullshit, and it's just too much, it's just beyond too much. And it's not about who's the livest, it's about who's the wisest. You got to be really smart. And trust me, man, I leave so much shit alone because I don't want to fall in the system, So I let a lot of slide, a lot of shit go and just let it be. As long as no one touches me or my kids, my family, they're good.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. I mean, Australia itself is sort of worlds apart from New York, bro. I mean, obviously there's still areas of Australia that are dangerous, but I can't imagine what those areas in the boroughs of New York are like at the worst of times. But obviously beautiful places as well, man. A lot of great communities too. I know you grew up in the Bronx. You were born in the Bronx, is that right?
Yeah, in the Bronx. My parents come from Puerto Rico, so they came over here, and I was born in the Bronx.
Most people know the Bronx as the birthplace of hip hop. It's kind of like holy land for a lot of us. Well, for anyone that's involved in hip hop and graffiti and and all the elements, obviously, it's an amazing place. And actually, I guess the hip hop culture is going to be 50 years old in a couple of years in 2023, which is pretty incredible. Can you tell me, as someone who couldn't be further removed from New York, in Australia, Sydney, Australia, can you tell me what it was like growing up in the Bronx during the 1970s and 1980s? What kind of environment and society existed there, and what it was like for someone like you as a kid growing up in those communities?
Man, it was fun, man, being a kid. It's like I come from a poor family. My parents were on welfare. My father always worked. My mom's always stood home, and taking care of us, me and my brothers. And I was the type of kid, I always liked to go outside. From 11, 12, 13, at 10 years old, 9 years old, I always liked to go outside, chill on the block with the guys. And when I was around 7, 8 years old, we lived on 160, was it 162nd and Elton, I think it was. And that was like right in the middle of the South Bronx. And there was nothing but abandoned buildings around there, burned cars. And my cousins would play in the abandoned buildings and play in abandoned cars. We were all just playing abandoned cars. And my grandmother lived in the projects, and I would go over there to stay there. I'm talking 10, 11 years old, and the projects were crazy, and it was basically Black and Spanish kids, and we were playing the playgrounds, and it was kind of boring. But I remember always taking trains with my moms and always watching the graffiti, man. The graffiti was insane. It was like, that's what the energy of it, of seeing all the tags on the inside and the pieces on the outside, it really dragged me into it. Like, man, I just wanted to do it, and I started meeting local kids in the neighborhood. They were just tagging their name on the block, and my cousin was tagging his name on the neighborhood, on mailboxes and walls and doors, and that's how it all started, just watching it. And then we would take train rides, because sometimes it'd be so boring in the neighborhood. We would just get on the train and take a train ride, because it was fun. You look out the window, look at the trains, and get off, and then get back and take a walk, steal some potato chips, sodas, candy, go back home. Everybody would chip in, buy some weed. My pops used to sell weed, so I would steal some of his weed, and we were all smoking. I'm talking about 11, 12 years old, man. We were wild kids, and we just had fun. It was just a fun thing. And at the same time, there was kids breakdancing on the neighborhood too. That was another form. And then there was, I would see it in the park sometimes. There would be like events, they called them jams, and be like, yo, there's a jam in the park. And then you would go there and you see B-boys and some dude DJing some rap music or just DJing, and then we would just chill there. And it was just a normal thing, I guess, when nobody had nothing, so they made something out of it. They made something happen, and that was, I guess, hip hop. I lived it, I was there, so I saw it evolve, and I was a breakdancer too, because I got into breaking as well at that time, and I was started to do trains, and I started breaking as well. So I was doing both elements. But as I got a little older, into like 15, 16, I got a little bigger and having girlfriends. I had a kid at like 16 years old. So I stopped breaking, but I was always still doing trains.
Was the environment in the Bronx very different to the other boroughs at that point? Was it sort of uncommon to have the burnt out buildings and that sort of stuff happening, and the kids getting bored and finding graffiti? Was that happening all over New York City?
I mean, I always stood in the Bronx, and I figured it was. And as I got older and learned more about Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan and Spanish Harlem and Harlem, you got to learn more about the other boroughs, how wild they were. Everything was pretty much the same, gangs everywhere. I remember the Savage Nomads, the Chingalings, with so many gangs. It was crazy. You would see these guys roll up in motorcycles with their jackets, and it was a little scary, but they never bothered nobody. They were from the neighborhood, they would just do their thing, and it was cool. It was normal for us, So, after, as I got a little older, I pretty figured, and talking to other people and meeting other graffiti writers from other boroughs, they was living the same way as well. But I know where I was from the Bronx was wild. It was crazy.
Can you think of any writers that were, when you first got into graffiti, or when you first started noticing graffiti around the Bronx and around New York, who were some of the guys that had already begun before you that sort of motivated you to start looking and start getting involved?
Oh, it was definitely Comet and Blade. Comet and Blade, man. I would take the train in big blade pieces, and Comet was so huge. They would take the whole car. It was like, what the hell? And then I remember we would take like, on the weekends in the summer, the family would get together, like 4 or 5 cars, my uncles, aunts, grandparents, and we would take, the highway to Orchard Beach. And then I seen their tags and throw-ups on the highways. I was like, wow, these guys like Common and Blade, Common and Blade, Common and Blade. So they were the guys, even though my cousin, Chico, he was a local tagger. He really got me into it because he had a marker and he was always tagging. And that kind of really set me off watching him do it. I wanted to do it. He was like a big brother to me. Every time I would stay at my grandmother's house, because my grandmother kind of brought him up from when he was a baby, and I always would like to stay in my grandmother's because my grandmother would spoil everybody, and my mom's out chilling, going to work, going to party, whatever. But I was always in my grandmother's. And my cousin always tagged, and he pretty much set me off. But me watching the trains and watching Common and Blade, and Is the Wiz. And then I remember one of the shows I always used to love was called Welcome Back, Kotter, with John Travolta when they were young. And the train would pass, and it was a Peanut 2-piece on it. And that did it too. Like, I was like, whoa, Peanut 2. It was like all those guys right there, pretty much started me when I watched the trains, because I wanted to be like that. I wanted to do my name like Comet, Blade, Peanut 2, Tracy 168. And also Is the Wiz. Is the Wiz, man. I remember taking the D train to Coney Island and watching the double C train. Is everywhere. Is was insane. So these are the guys, more or less, that got me open to want to be like them. Into like 1981, 82, I started to really look into more graffiti, and I started to read more with the burners like Case 2 and Mitch 77, and you had a TK 170, you had a Phase 2, you had all these guys who did more wild style burners, and I wanted to do that as well. I was trying to learn that as well. And then the insides were bombed, like tags everywhere. I remember Band 2 everywhere, and the outsides, Mitch 77, Disco. These are the guys who really opened me up and got me to want to be like them. They were like the superheroes, of graffiti.
Man, I mean, just some of those names that you've mentioned, it's incredible that you were, right there to see that shit in person, man. That's some stuff that, everyone after that era really dreams about. And the only thing we have to go off is pictures and stories and images. It's incredible.
I lay on my back sometimes and I think of it, man, when I used to just sit down in the bench or the train station and watch them go by. It's just like, it's insane. It's just like, I'm just blessed, and I thank God to live that era. I was pretty much blessed. I was caught it right there in the beginning. Even though the trains were killed in the 70s when I was a kid, so, but I didn't start hitting it till like 80, 81. I started tagging on trains and doing throw-ups and stuff like that.
Yeah, man. That's fucking crazy shit, man. I mean, I love hearing it, man. Did you mention gangs? Did gangs and graffiti exist separately? Was there a crossover? Was there the gangs in New York? Were they sort of intertwined with the graffiti culture in those early years? Or were they separate?
No, they were separate, but there was writers that were down with gangs too. I know T-Kid was one of them. He was in a gang back in the, I think, late 70s. I think he even got stabbed and shot. There's a lot of writers that were in gangs as well. A lot of the gang writers, they all tagged up too, but they weren't like big taggers. They would probably write their name like Papa or Junior, and they would just tag their name around. Something like the Warriors, the movie Warriors was kind of a dope, concept. A lot of the gangs, they left their tag behind, but they weren't big taggers where they went to the trains and did whole cars and stuff like that. So it was kind of pretty much together, even though somebody didn't tag. It's like you have a crew of my friends, maybe 2 of us tag, 2 or 3 of us don't tag, but we still hang. I guess it was like that.
I guess it would have been easy at that young age, and especially you mentioned you had a kid at 16 to sort of get sucked into that life, just in terms of financially supporting yourself, especially if there's not a lot of opportunities, I can imagine, around that area at that time. Did a lot of writers find themselves sort of toing and froing between graffiti and, those other activities that might have been more negative?
Yeah, a lot of writers became, when the trains died or they stopped painting trains, they became big drug dealers. They quit, some of them got killed. Some of them went to jail for life or did long bids, 10, 15 years. Sometimes what happened to this writer? Oh, he's doing 20 years. What? Like for selling big heavyweight of drugs, because it was hard. Nobody could get good jobs. So some of the writers needed to make money. They started having kids, or they just wanted to make money and sell drugs, and that's how it was. And a lot of them got killed doing it from, other drug dealers. So it was a really wild thing. Me, I just, I sold drugs too, but, it was getting crazy to a point where I was like, I can't fuck with this, because I'm going to get killed. It was a lot of always other drug dealers trying to rob you, take your spot, all the cops always arresting you. It was it's either you got to go big or don't do it, and I was small, I was selling a little weed here and there, to make some money, plus working. I had to, I had to make money, but it got a little out of hand to a point where I'm like, I need to stop because I'm going to get killed or go to jail. And I didn't want to do that, because my kids, they stopped me from a lot of shit. Some dudes don't care. I know guys that today, they're still in and out of jail. It's insane, since the early 80s. And they got kids out there, they're probably so big and they don't even know where they're at, because they were never there for their kids. It's kind of fucked up. That's why a lot of kids, grow up and do wild shit because they really have no father to try to help them or try to give them some support or be a mentor, and it's really a sad situation. A lot of kids I grew up with had no fathers, and then they would see how cool my father was. I'd be chilling on the block playing skelsies or stickball, and my pops be coming out of work. I would run up to him, yo, pops, and give me some money. He would give me $2, $3. That was a lot of money back then, back in 81, 82, and with that, you go buy some weed and light all your boys up and then go back and play or go paint trains.
Yeah, man, that's it's devastating when kids grow up without, one or both parents. It's just a bad cycle, I guess, and you would have seen a lot of that. Correct me if I'm wrong, in 1982, you started KD or Kings Destroy, is that right?
Yeah, I started Kids Destroy because we were kids, in 82. My boy Stomp Free, rest in peace. He passed away in 86 he had gotten into a fight. Somebody hit him with a bat and he went to a coma, came out of it. And that really hurt me, man. But, then I recruited other guys like Spell, Rio, Am1, Kai, and we were like from the block, when I moved uptown in Mashula Parkway in DeKalb, and we started Kids Destroy. And then when we took over the 4 line in 83, I turned it into Kings Destroy because I was king of the 4 line. It was the line on my block in my neighborhood, Mashula Parkway uptown. So I turned it into Kings Destroy. And before you know it, I just started recruiting a lot of writers who wanted to get down because I was up so much. I went on to other lines, the 1s, the 2s, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s, some of the letter lines. I try to go all city.
2 years after you started KD in 1984, the movie Star Wars came out. Obviously a lot of people listening to this are going to be familiar with that movie, but just if anyone's not, it's a documentary like highlighting the early years of the hip hop culture, specifically graffiti, but it had, a lot of music and breakdancing in there as well. And also perspectives from the authorities and mothers and things like that. It's a famous movie and it's great. It's interesting because in that film, a lot of the things that are involved with the graffiti culture today come from that film specifically, which is really incredible. Do you remember when that film came out, and did it have an impact straight away, or has it only had an impact later on in its sort of life, so to speak?
Oh man, that movie, it was dope, man. Even though a lot of writers didn't come out in it, because you can't get everybody, but there was writers too that did more than others in that movie, but didn't come out, which is cool. It's a documentary, can't get everybody. Blade was Tracy 168 wasn't it? Mitch 77 wasn't in it. A lot of writers that did a lot more than other writers. Some writers in there got highlighted, got big, spots, big roles, but I remember when they were filming, it was a big talk, because in 82, I already started going to Henry Chalfant's studio. People, that was like another bench. People like, yo, you ever been to Henry's? And then I met him one time on the platform taking photos on the 4 line. I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh shit, that's Henry, because I used to hear about him. And then I went up to him and was like, yo, you Henry Chalfant? He was like, yeah. And then I said, yeah, I'm COPE2. And he goes, oh, I caught a couple of your photos. He caught a couple of my pieces. He was catching them. I was like, really? So I was like, oh, that's cool, man. And then he's like, you could come down to my studio. I'll give you copies. This guy was an amazing man, really genuine. He looked out, always hooked up people. So I remember going down there, and then you would meet other writers. And then I remember he had a table filled with photos. And he would just, if you wanted a photo, just ask him, he would give it to you. People stole photos, which is kind of whack. But he always gave me photos of my pieces. And he always, back then I had a little 110 camera, so it was cheap, but I caught good flicks, and he had the dope 35 millimeter. So his photos were always amazing, and he would give them to me. I was like, whoa, this is fresh, and I was never into taking pictures of my pieces, because, you did it for fun, and to take over a line, that's it, your pieces ran, they got buffed or ragged, But then people were like, yo, you should take pictures. Even Henry was like, you should try to take pictures of your pieces, and I started doing it, and before you know it, I caught a lot of pieces, but a lot of them I didn't catch. But I have pretty much like 50% of my pieces, which is not bad, of my trains, 82 to like all the way to the end of the 80s when the trains died. So I caught a lot of stuff, not bad, but it was Star Wars was amazing. I went to the premiere of my cousin Chico. He took me. It was on 42nd. They were giving it with Wild Style, and I went. It was so packed. I mean, everybody was there. Like you could see all the writers, the DJs, the B-boys. It was so packed, that movie theater. It was insane, and it was funny because part Cap came on. Everybody was like, "Boo!" They thought Cap was in the movie theater, but he wasn't. He wasn't there. But
he was kind of like the villain of the movie, wasn't he?
It was kind of dope. I had just met Cap too, and I wasn't really. I didn't like what he was doing. He was just ragging people's pieces, and but everybody, a lot of people go over each other. But Cap just took it to another level. And his thing was that it's an illegal thing. There's no rules. Like you go there and you do it illegal, and I want my throw up. That's all I want. But people will go over him, and he just didn't like it, and I understood. And I remember when he told me he got filmed for Style Wars and stuff like that. But when it came out, man, it was mind blowing. It was like, wow. And at the same time, you had the Subway Art book coming out. So I had no idea it would you would never think that it would inspire the world, the way it just the world, once it got a hold of Style Wars and Subway Art, it just took on another level.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, man. I mean, I watch that movie probably once a year or maybe, once every 6 months. And it's just iconic, obviously. But it's interesting that you said that, a lot of writers weren't really featured in that, because I guess that makes sense, doesn't it? You can't get everyone in there, and there would have been a lot of people sort of on the periphery of the scene or even heavily entrenched in it that weren't featured at all. And I guess if it was a couple of years later, you probably would have played a big part in the film. Do you think so?
I mean, I was doing pieces at the time. I was hoping one of my pieces would pop up, but it didn't. A lot of writers did pieces and they didn't pop up. I had pieces running on the 4s, but in that movie they filmed mostly the 2s, the 5s, and the 6s. Some of the letter lines. I don't even think they filmed any 4 lines. If they filmed the 4 line, maybe I would have came out. Who knows? But that movie, just me not being in it, made me just want to go harder, so I really just started smashing trains harder, to a point where a lot of writers after that movie just disappeared. They didn't write anymore. They quit. Some of them got sick, went to jail, got killed, died from illnesses. And a lot of them are still around. Some of them went to the gallery scene. A lot of them were already doing galleries at that time, already went to the gallery scene. So it was kind of interesting. And the movie just made me go harder, to a point where I'm just going to go hard, just be bigger.
Did you ever consider in those early years that one day in your life you might be able to support yourself through graffiti? Did that ever cross your mind that it's going to become something that you're doing into your later years in life and something that you can support your family from?
Oh, hell no. Never. I would never. I mean, worked from 16 years old, I was working, always worked jobs, 2 jobs. I've done every job, from construction to maintenance, to security, to mailroom, messenger. I've done it all. And I just damn, I can't do this no more. It was like the pay, sometimes you have to work 2 jobs or work 1 job and sell some weed or crack on the side or some cocaine on the side to make that extra money. So when you pay your bills, you got something for your pocket, so you could go to the clubs and release some stress, get drunk, get fucked up, to pass time. And then, here come Monday again, and you had to work, and I always watched, people like Futura, Crash, Days, Lady Pink, all these writers that were doing canvases already, that were doing gallery scenes, Dondi, these are guys that were already doing galleries, and I would hear about it. I was like, damn, these guys are doing canvas. And I'm hearing these guys getting paid a couple of hundred, couple of thousand back then for a painting. And that was always in my head, but I just didn't know how to transition into it, or thought I would be accepted, in the sense that I was more of a hardcore writer. I did everything, bombing, piecing, throw ups. I did everything. And it was kind of hard. And I figured to be in part of the gallery scene. You had to go down there, go to the gallery shows, try to meet people. And I was never like that. I went to a few shows and walk in there. I would look at it like, wow, this is cool. So it was always there, until like 19, probably the late 90s. I started doing canvases and I tried it out. And, meeting people and connecting, I started doing little shows in like graph shops. And I came out with a video, Kings Destroy, in 2000. And I got flown for the first time. And that's it. It took off from there.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, how was that initial experience sort of moving into the galleries? Once you had sort of entered that world, was it sort of sayonara from there? Did you just continue that on from the late 90s, or was initially, did you bounce back and forth and think this is not the right thing to do, or, I'm not into this, or straight away did you see that as an option for you?
Yeah, I kind of saw it as an option in the sense that, people like, yo, dude, you paid your dues, man. Sell your artwork, make some money, man. You got kids, fuck what people think. Sometimes people, they say you're selling out or they start hating, talking shit. But, all these other big writers doing it, they don't care what anyone says. Why should you care? You know what I'm saying? Because I guess I was more hardcore. I was more of a graffiti purist. I liked in the 90s to go on a wall that was bombed, go inside and talk to the owner. Yo, can we do like your wall, paint some art on it? And he'd be like, yeah, sure. It's destroyed, make it nice. And we would paint it and do burners like in the street in the early 90s. People were already doing pieces in the street in the 80s, but I started taking it to another level. And then European writers would come in, and I started meeting European writers and starting to learn that graffiti's like worldwide now. The shit's in Europe. They're making spray cans, they're making markers and fat caps all over the fucking world. In LA took it to another level as well after New York, And I was like, wow, this thing has got global. Like this shit is on another level. There was graffiti magazines all over the world, even in Australia. You had so many graffiti mags, and I was just like overwhelmed. I was like, wow, this is cool. Like that's what made me really push more to just keep on painting and keep on doing what I do.
Mm. When did that understanding come that graffiti had sort of reached other countries in particular? Was that during sort of the 90s and early 2000s? Was there a point where your eyes were sort of open to see, wow, this thing has gotten to basically every country? Was that during the 1990s?
I think it was even probably in the maybe mid 80s, probably in Europe already, but I didn't know it wasn't connected or looking into Europe graffiti. But as I got older and start to learn, I heard about a lot of writers that were already old school from Europe. They already started in the mid 80s. So I guess it's been around in Europe for a long time. And who knows, probably Australia too, So I wasn't really looking into it until I started getting into graffiti mags in the mid 90s. And I started to look and I'm like, wow, this dude did a piece in like 87, 88, 86, Germany, from Paris. And I was like, wow, this thing has really been around. It's like, it's been just spreading everywhere. It's been around. So it got me really open and excited to really like connect with these other writers from Europe, and I did. Before you know it, I started to connect with writers that would come into New York, and I would connect with them, meet them at a graffiti shop called Scrapyard. It was called Soho's at the time in Canal Street. And they will all go there to buy graffiti supplies, graffiti, let's say, magazines, basically. They didn't have spray cans at the time. They weren't selling it yet. But at that time, the Europeans were bringing in European paint. Belton, it was called Belton, Buntlock, Sparvar. And that paint was so dope. I was still using Rustos and Krylons. And we would trade cans because they loved the Rustos and the Krylons. They wanted to try our paint, what we used back in the days, and I wanted to try their paint because I remember they had more colors than us. They had so many colors. I'm like, wow, look at this paint, look at that paint. Wow, it's different from us. And that's how it all started. And before you know it, I was doing walls with all these European writers in the 90s.
Wow, man. Yeah, that's crazy. You mentioned Kings Destroy, the movie that you brought out. Let's talk about that a little bit. First of all, what year was that released and when was it filmed?
I think we started meeting. I met Tommy Marin and Philip in like 97 through my uncle. I had some pieces in the Bronx, and I had a piece of my uncle's block where he lived, and he told me, he called me when they say this white guy was filming your stuff, and he asked me if I knew you. I told him he was my nephew. He didn't believe me, but he gave me his number. But my uncle was like, from the hood. He knew the hood. So he was like, I don't know. He looked like a cop, but I don't think he is. And I said, I'll give him a call. I called him, and he said, hey, man, yo, I'm Tommy Marin. I'd like to meet you and, treat you to some dinner. We talk. So I was like, hey, you sound like a cop, dude. Like, I'm not fucking around. I'm not. So I said, all right, let's meet at that wall. So we met. I looked at him, said, no, I don't think this guy's a cop. He broke it down who he was. He had auto body shops in Long Island, and he took up this hobby of graffiti. And then I didn't know he was already working with some graffiti writers, FX Crew, which I was part of too at the time, with Per and Sess, and he was working with them already. So I was like, oh, okay, all right, if you're working, all right, that's cool. Those are my boys, at the time. So I felt cool about it. But, I said, oh, so you're working on, I didn't even know he was working on a video, a documentary with them. And then he said he wanted to do one on me alone because I was so, I had the Bronx destroyed, with walls, throw-ups. He was like, man, everywhere I go, you're like everywhere. You're like the top. Like everyone cope this, cope that. Like I would like to just focus on you. And at the time I had all the graffiti mags. I was already had interviews in all the graffiti mags from all over Europe. And, I was just killing it in all kind of angles of graffiti at the time. So he really wants to do a documentary. But I said, man, I don't know about that. The money was good. He wanted to give me a big chunk up front. And, I was like, damn, I'm going to get into some shit with the police. I've already had problems with them. And I still did it, because he said, yo, if you get into shit with the police, I'll take care of all the lawyer fees. It was a good deal. I said, fuck it. Why not? Let's do it. Some of the missions in the video, you see my face blurred. So that kind of helped in a sense. When they came down and arrested me, they couldn't really pin me for that stuff. They tried, they couldn't. So.
I mean, that movie, first of all, that was my introduction to you, when I was a teenager, and it just ignited me. I was straight out the door. I was just blown away by that film. And, me and all my homeboys watched it, and it was amazing, man. But I did notice you're really candid in that, obviously they just follow you around and you're racking paint and doing pieces. It's incredible, but I imagine that you did get a bit of attention from the authorities once it was released. Did they hit you up straight away after it came out?
Yeah, I mean, I was just coming out one time with my dogs. I have 2 pit bulls, and they rolled on me, like 5 or 6 of them, I think it was. And they was like, hey, Cope, the video man. I already knew what it was. They was like, you got to come with us. I'm like, come with you for what? Like, I don't know what the fuck. So come on, you got to come with us. The video, come on. You know what it is. You know why we're here. So just dogs to the tree. And my at the time, my ex-wife came down, took the dogs. And I went in, and that was it. I didn't say a word. And, I called Tommy. Tommy called the lawyer. And that was it. I got a lawyer, and that was it. They took responsible. I mean, they handled business. And I got this was like in 99, 2000. So I got a good deal I think it was a year probation and some fines and nothing serious. Well, I guess when paid lawyer, it helps, when you and I had a pretty good lawyer at the time, and people were tripping out and didn't go to jail because in the sense that in the video, you really see me doing permission walks, and doing little throw-ups here and there. But if you look at the video good, when I'm doing subway cars, you don't see my face, it's blurred. It could be any Puerto Rican kid up there doing it. So they were pretty upset. They couldn't really pin me for that. So they had to deal, and before you know it, it was over. And it was kind of cool because of the video, I was able to fly over Europe. I did my first tour in Germany. I hit like 5, 6 cities with some graffiti shops and did some signings. This dude Zepster, there's an old school graffiti writer from Germany. He had a few shops, and he was connected with a few graffiti shops in Germany. So I was flown there for the first time, and it was mind blowing, to go to all these graph shops. And you see lines of kids outside buying the fucking video. I was like, wow, this shit is crazy. This is so dope. It was like being a fucking movie star.
Yeah, I can imagine, man. Must have been crazy.
Yeah, especially in Germany. It was my first time. I remember we first went to LA. I did a few signings there, and it was my first time in LA, and LA was so dope. You know, I met a lot of old school writers there, and then I was asked to go to Germany, and I was like, "What? Germany? Get out of here! That's crazy!" Before you know it, it was just I just started going everywhere.
Yeah, man, it's beautiful, man. It must have created a lot of opportunity. And in one part of the film, there's a bloke, sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Is it Jason or Jason? He highlights that part of your legacy is the amount of people that you've painted with, and also the amount of people that you just know, and sort of the social part of your character. Was the community around graffiti and hip hop important to you, aside from bombing and painting and trains? Was the actual community, did that always play a role for you as well?
Oh yeah, big time. You know, because I was at the time I was pretty cool with everybody, man. You know, we was all cool. I got along with everybody. I really had no beefs. You know, was all love. It was all peace. You know, until I got more bigger. When my book came out in 2003, you know, a writer from Paris named Oris and Nick, who writes Mir, they wanted to do a book on me, and I did the book, and then I started to get did a lot of projects. You know, I was doing projects with ADIDAS, and I started to take off. Then the galleries came, and before you know it, it's crazy, but a lot of these guys I was so cool with, you know, they saw that, they started hating me, started getting jealous. You start hearing this, you start hearing that, and I'm like, wow, you know, instead of people being happy for you, you made it out the hood. You know, you're doing something better for yourself. You're living off your art. You know, they're backing off on you, hating on you, talking crap. And it's sad, you know, because I mean, I've seen people make it and I'm happy. You know, I've seen people before me, you know, in the gallery scenes. And I never talked bad about them, like, oh, they're a sellout, oh, this and that. I'm like, wow, he did it. I'm going to do it too. Fuck that. You know, I always took that energy and used it towards me. But a lot of writers that I was so cool with, you could say 90% of the writers that are in that video now, I don't even talk to anymore. I don't, yeah, it's just like, they just totally like flip and hate, and it's terrible. A lot of them probably still live with their moms, or, you know, don't got any job. They can't even sell a canvas. They don't fly. A lot of them don't. I've never even left New York. You know, they still live in New York. You know, they still paint only in New York. And they see, you know, dude like me who they were cool with go all over the world and live off graffiti. And, you know, I guess, you know, they just fucking get jealous, because jealousy is a motherfucker. You know, it's part of human nature. I understand it. We all get jealous of certain things, but some dudes take it to the extreme. Like, it's crazy. You know, they'll create lies, rumors. And then when the internet came, it got worse, you know? But it's human nature, and sometimes you got to learn to accept it. You know, it's just nothing you can do about it but keep going.
I guess it's, in some ways, it's a sign of your success. You know, when you start doing good things in life, a lot of people are going to fucking try and shoot you down, man. So if there's anything positive you can take from the amount of shit talk that people have about, you know, whatever you're doing, you know, for anyone that is, like, it's a good sign that you're on the right track. You mentioned working with brands, with Adidas, and I think you've worked with Converse before as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that was the first sneaker I did. I think Converse I was the first artist to do something with Converse, graffiti writer.
How was that experience? It must have been sort of a dream come true. I imagine that you grew up wearing Adidas and possibly Converse as well. Was that a big moment for you?
Oh yeah, big time. Especially the money that we're paying, it was huge. You know, the Converse was a good payday, and my sneaker was like in every damn store. I would go down to the Village and walk down whole Broadway from like 14th Street to like Canal, and every store on Broadway, every sneaker store, shoe store had the Coke Converse in the window. I was tripping. I was like, wow, this is dope. Like, it was so cool. And people were like, wow, this thing got a Converse sneaker, you know? And that was kind of, you know, another level. And then the Adidas was insane. You know, that was like a project with Adidas and Foot Locker. So they kind of did a collaboration with Foot Locker, and they flew only in Europe. You know, it was supposed to come to the States, but I had an issue with a writer from Germany a photographer that's with a writer from Germany who I used a photo, and the guy got upset, even though he said I could. But I don't know, it's a long story. But, you know, I thought they were my friends. But when they see, one thing about money too, when people see you doing projects, that's when you really see who your friends are. You know, you see really there to support you, who's there to look out for you, who's there to see you make money, and you know, you really see who's true colors. You see people's true colors, and who's like a real friend. You know, that's when you see this real deal. And I was flown over to like Foot Locker flew me to London. It was Italy, Paris, and I did some in-stores in Foot Locker, and that was pretty fun, man. That was cool.
Mm. Are they still sort of available? I imagine sort of on the underground they're available to buy. Do they still? They're not still in production, I imagine.
Oh no, it was like a limited edition, and I mean, I still have a couple of bins filled. You know, which I just put them away for you know, later on in the future, we give them to my grandkids when I'm gone. They can try to sell them and make some money off them. Because that's when everything's worth more when you're gone.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of people, especially in the hip hop community, I guess, man. You mentioned sort of, I want to talk to you a little bit about graffiti publications, magazines. They started really early on in the graffiti sort of community, as you mentioned, and all across the world. Australia has some really notable graffiti magazines, one being Vapors and the other Hype magazine, and a bunch of others, but they're probably the most well known. Actually, a friend of mine, Exit KOC, who's a writer from Australia, we're friends, and he mentioned that you used to send him flicks for Hype magazine over to Australia. You know, I think potentially the early 90s, late 80s, possibly. Do you remember sending photos, you know, of panels over to Australia to get in those magazines? And do you remember Hype magazine?
Yeah, of course. That's how it started. I mean, you know, you would buy the mag, you would they also had it in Tower Records. There was a place called Tower Records.
For sure,
in Manhattan,
yeah.
and they had a magazine section, and they had graffiti mags there. So I would steal them. I wasn't paying for them, but you know, sometimes you have to be quick. If you got stressed, you have to just buy it, whatever. So all the magazines always had an address to send in photos. So I was like, yo, I'm gonna send photos. And I would just send photos to like all these graph mags all over the world. You know, and I remember Hype Mag. It was dope. I was like, wow, they had so many issues. You know, I was like, wow, Mag is dope. And I sent some photos. Before you know it, I was on the front cover with KRS and Fat Joe. And that was a dope issue. And they would always give me love and use my photos. And I if I'm correct, I think I did an interview too for that magazine. I still have all the magazines put away in bins. And I started doing interviews in all the graffiti mags because I remember a lot of New York writers didn't care for it. They were like, oh, fuck that. Like some graffiti writers in New York were a little cocky about it and didn't care because they felt like, you know, they were trying to rape our culture and all, but they're taking money off our culture. I'm like, you know, what are you going to do? Like, who cares? Instead of being against them, work with them. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not going to stop it, you know? And then before you know it, when I'm in all these graffiti mags and I'm in all of them, people started like, damn, this nigga Cope's in all the graph mags, you know, because I'm going to take over graffiti mags. You know, that was the thing. You know, if I can't go to Europe like that, why not just do an interview, have some photos in there? They always would put like dedicate a New York section. And then I would have pictures and other old school writers would have pictures. And that's how I started to get pretty known around the world.
Yeah, it's amazing. And just speaking to the twins, the guys that made Hype magazine here in Australia, I mean, just the most amount of respect for guys like you that sent flicks over, and it was really important. I guess a lot of people do talk shit about that thing, you know, you shouldn't profit off magazines or profit off graffiti, but 10, 20 years later, they're the same people that are saying they're the most amazing things ever, and it's so important that they're around. So I think you had a bit of foresight in that sense.
And in the end of the day, when I learned about the magazines, people didn't really make no money. You know, I learned more about it, and it's like, yo, we do this for fun. We do this, you know, for the culture, because the money we put in, we just make it right back to reprint. We're not making nothing. A lot of these guys were working jobs to make these magazines. So I was like, wow, you know, they don't even have to do that. You know, they're not. Some people think they're making millions or thousands off these magazines when they really weren't. You know, you start to learn and meet these people who are making the magazines, and they tell you straight up, you know, and most of the time, 50%, they're giving the magazines away, you know, because we would meet them when I was going to like, when I started going to Europe and all these countries, I would meet a lot of them and they would give me like 4 or 5 issues or a stack of mags, you know, they were giving me 3. So, and that's not to just to me, to a lot of other writers, they will give just magazines away. So you think about it, giving free magazines away and paying for postage and this and that back then, it's impossible for you to get rich off a graffiti mag. Like, come on, they really was doing it for the culture because that's what they loved. It was like a hobby to them. And I appreciated it, unlike some writers would talk shit. And I'm like, people always got to talk shit. Someone's always got to be, moody, grumpy, hating. It's like that. It's just like that.
Yeah, man, 100%. And I guess you see a lot of those magazines don't actually last. And that's probably due to the reason that there's not a lot of money in them. I did want to ask you though, speaking of sort of negative attitudes in the scene, has what people have to say about you, has that put a bit of a negative spin on graffiti, your love for graffiti, looking back on your life? Has that sort of played a part in how you feel about graffiti today? Has it affected you at all?
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. I'm I don't really fuck with people no more because it's a thing where I was cool with so many people, and when the hate started really bad, one thing I learned is some writers are very good manipulators. They can manipulate another writer that you are so cool with not to be cool with you anymore, not to rep your crew. It's insane. It's insane the shit people do, the shit people say, just to go against you, to try to destroy your name, your image, your character. It's just, man, I lay back and I think like, yo, this is crazy. Like starts to make you like really hate human nature. Like me, I would never go online, especially when the internet came and make memes about people and start saying this about that person, that he's this and he's that, when there's no proof, no evidence, and no real documentation, only because this person said it and that person said it. And then before you know it, you got 20 other people believing it, and it spreads like a disease. And, it's a sad situation, but it's crazy because in the end of the day, it didn't really do anything to me because I got bigger. So it shows you that lies cannot destroy a person's true character and a person's true life. And me always being true to who I am as a graffiti writer, as a person, it was never able and would never able to and would never destroy me. Because in the end of the day, I am the truth. I do what I do, the truth. I always do stuff the right way. We're not perfect. We all do crazy shit. But some people, they'll do anything and say anything they can to try to destroy you. And you cannot destroy anybody with lies. That's number one. You can't. It's nature like that. Because later on, people are going to want to know what was the truth. And when they find out the truth, they're like, wow, this guy was trying to kill this guy with lies all the time, all this long, and I'm believing it. And I think a lot of guys to a point notice like, man, I fucking like flipped on Cope for nothing, and I know he's not this. And maybe they're afraid to apologize now. They don't want to be cool with me because their ego, it's cool, man. It's cool. It's just, you learn how people really are. And there's a lot of people I thought were really genuine, really cool, a real dude. And then you hear that he said this and said that or did this behind your back. I'm like, no way, you're kidding me. And it's true, they did. And I'm like, but for what? For what? Because someone told them this or someone told them that. But then you learn it's just out of their own insecurity. They just, in the end of the day, they just purely and always been jealous of you. So now they're just like, fuck it. I'm going to join the We Hate COPE2 fucking gang. And before you know it, you got everybody hating on you for nothing, man. It's just, I just over it already to a point where like, whatever, man. As long as you don't come in arm's reach and try to touch me or anything, we're good. I'll fuck with my kid, because you can't stop it, regardless what you do. It was to a point I was trying to attack everybody back. And it just got worse, because half of these people you don't even know, you'll never see, or you won't run into, so you're out there looking for them. Some of them you saw, you run out your car with a big giant Rambo knife, you're chasing them down the road, and it's just like, this shit's stupid, man. You're in your mid-50s, like, this shit's corny. It's corny. I'm just going to continue to become bigger and kill them with success. And that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, man, 100%, bro. It's a real credit to your character, the way that you've managed to sort of navigate those murky waters, man. So much respect for doing so. I did want to ask you, what kind of effect did 9/11 have on graffiti in New York City back in 2001? Obviously, it was a really painful time for New York City on a whole, but just speaking specifically of graffiti, did it make it a lot harder to paint during those years? Was there any painting happening?
I'm not sure. I know I was still doing trains. You know, they were saying all this hype about, oh, they're watching the train yards, blah, 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 for terrorists. But I was doing trains with no problem. You know, I didn't have a problem. And I don't really get into the politics stuff. You know, it's like when I saw that happen, I was like, damn, that shit is like, that's some real gangster shit. You know, they got some real beef with someone like, or who knows, the government maybe did it themselves. You know, it's so many theories, you know, and it's, to me, I don't really care because it's probably some real, either America did some foul shit to someone, you know, or they did it themselves to have an excuse to go over to the overseas, to the Middle East, to take oil. And who knows, you know, the government does what they do. And it's, you know, I don't get involved, I don't care. And my thing is, I felt bad for the people who died, you know, who were in those buildings, you know, and died because of that shit. You know, it's sad. You know, that's what really bothered me. And people went to work that morning, normal, you know, good people that just work and have families, and they're gone because of some bullshit, you know, that happened. But the government, you know, at the end of the day, that's how it is. You know, the governments from all around the world, they shed blood for money. You know, they will shed blood for money, and they don't care what it takes, how many people die and get killed, so they can make money, a business. Either they got to take oil or whatever, something, take a land. It's just, it's been like that since the beginning of time. You know, all these wars, and it's just, that's the world, you know. And that's the governments, they all trying to be who's the toughest, who's the biggest, who has the biggest dick, who has the biggest fucking atomic bomb. It's just, that's their world. And in the end of the day, I live my life my way and just do what I got to do, because when I'm dead and gone, it's going to keep going. You know, there's always going to be governments doing and beefing and having war and fighting with each other. And it's just, it's sad, but, you know, it that's the way it is, you know. And it was just, I was sad for the people who died in 9/11, and it was terrible. And, you know, but we all got to move on and keep living. I just kept living normal, like every day.
Yeah, so it sounds like it didn't have much of an impact in terms of being able to go out and do graffiti in the city.
I don't think they were really stressing graffiti at all. They were really stressing more terrorist shit. You know, we're really watching a lot of, I guess they were more into raiding people's houses in America who was Muslim, to see if they were connected to the guys over there. Like, who knows? And I think graffiti was not even on their radar, and they weren't even worried about that shit because they had bigger problems. Yeah, they have bigger problems to deal with.
Yeah, man. Um, are your children artistic? Have they taken on the torch of art, or even graffiti specifically? Have you sort of showed them the ropes and things like that?
My son, my oldest son, he really never messed with it. My daughter did. My daughter Vanessa, she did. She still does little tagging here and there, but they don't really get into it like that. You know, my 14 daughter, she draws pretty nice, but they don't do the graffiti. They're not into it like that. But they're pretty much all pretty good with the art in general.
Yeah, for sure, man. I imagine it would rub off even just a little bit, you know, seeing what you've managed to achieve and whatnot. I got to ask you, man, how many trains do you reckon you've painted in your life, if you had to guess?
Man, who knows, man?
Is it hard
It's
to
tough.
guess?
Yeah, it's tough, man. I have trains people have never seen. I've done all over the world, especially New York. And who knows, man? Especially ones I didn't catch pictures of in the early '80s. I think of some pop up, you know, once in a while. Some guy would be like, "Yo, I have a picture of your train from '83 and '84." I'm like, "Word," and they'll show it to me. I'll be like, "Oh man, wow!" I even forgot that I even did that until I see the picture, and I'm like, "Oh, I did that in this layup. I did that one in this yard." That's so cool. I get like so happy when people. I remember I did a trap. Me and Trap One from Star Wars did a car in '82. on the floors, and I was always going crazy for those pictures. And one day this guy just like posted it, and I was like, how the fuck did you get that? But it was a bad picture. And then he told me, oh, it's one of, this guy gave it to me. And then they told me it was a photo from Henry or Martha Cooper. One of them had it. And then I met this writer, Star, and he gave me his copies that were really like on point, and it was so clean. You could tell it was a Henry shot because it was like the whole train in the back and the buildings in the back, and it was trapped one coat. And I have it, and I'm like, oh man, this is so fresh. And there's a lot of other cars out there I just don't have pictures of that I remember. But some people have pictures, they just won't give it. They're very cheap, or they just won't give you a copy. Some people are like that, because I understand, I respect it, but some people are very tight with their photos.
How did you go about developing film in those, back in the early days? Was it sort of risky to go and develop all these pictures of, essentially illegal behavior?
Well, the trains, I stole my camera in Woolworth. It was a place called Woolworth, and I stole a 110 camera Kodak. This was like probably two, and then you steal the rolls of film. It was so easy. And then, by the pharmacy, I remember they would have like a basket, and it would say, you can put the film in there and pick it up like 2 days later. And then you pick it up, you look for your name, and then you pay for it. But we would just take it and walk out. So it was just, I can imagine developing and seeing the train pics, they must have been bugging out, but I never had a problem. I was just like, stealing the film, putting it, and just taking it back. And then they started putting it behind the counter. I guess they got hip to it because a lot of writers were doing that. So I like, fuck it, I started paying for it, and it's nothing you could do.
Yeah, man, that's crazy to think that they would just, these days you could never just walk up to a bucket and take whatever's, there's always processes and forms to fill out and fucking give me your ID and whatnot. That's insane.
Yep.
Can you best describe, you mentioned, I think it's called the 4 Yard, you were saying, and it obviously in your Kings Destroy documentary, you spend a bit of time in there. Can you run me through like what a night going out painting in one of those train yards was like, and how long you spent in there?
Oh man, it was so fun, man. It all depends, what yard you go to. You always go in there, and there's so many trains, and you just check it out before you hit anything, because there's always workers, there's cleaners, and you make sure it's pretty much dead. When you go in there, you do your piece. If you're finished, go inside the train, you do some tags, roll up a blunt, roll up some weed, or sometimes we would smoke weed, hide somewhere, smoke some weed before we start painting while the workers are there. And then when they leave, we'll go and do our thing. Sometimes you would get raided, you'd be painting and there's fucking cops everywhere, and you're jumping on top of trains. I was younger, and thinner, so I was really fast. I would always go on top of the trains. Cops would never go on top of trains. They would look at you like you're fucking crazy. So I would go on top of the train and jump from train to train to train till you get to the other side of the yard, and then get down and just get away. I would go under the train sometimes, but I was a little scary of that shit because the third rail was right there. You never know, you could fucking bang into it and you're done. So I always top of the trains, because the cops never fucked with top. They never went on top or under the trains. They were always running between the trains to try to surround the yard. So when you come out, they'll grab you. But the yard, sometimes back then, they had so many holes and so many ways in and out. It was impossible for you to get caught.
Mm. Tell me about the third rail, because we don't have one of those here. Our trains are sort of electrified from overhead. Was it clear to see what the third rail was, or was it, because I imagine it's pretty dark, there's a lot of shit going on. Was it marked or anything? I imagine a lot of people would just step on that. And was it just constantly electrified? How did that thing work?
The third rail is the third track, but it has a wood covering it. So it was a third rail. A lot of people use the third rail to step on, to go higher, to do their pieces, because it was with a wood. But if you slip and you hit, your foot hits under that wood and you hit that third rail, you're done, man. You're gonna get, electrocuted, and it's a wrap. Depending if you can get. I've heard people get electrocuted. I've got electrocuted before, and I got off really fast. You feel it so quick. You know, I guess people, you know, just caught a little shock and got off fast, you know. But we always knew we were cautious, and we were pretty, you know, educated in the sense that, yo, you're gonna step on the wood part. Don't fucking, you know. I never even stepped on any tracks. Yeah, I always try to keep my feet on the rocks and the wood, the rocks and the wood. That was it, you know. And I always kept it like that. That was another reason why cops never really went into train yards, because of, you know, the tracks. You know, they don't fucking go and tracing graffiti writers and they get electrocuted. To them, it's not worth it. But cops came in, you know, they would chase you a little something. The workers would chase you. You know, they would throw rocks at you sometimes. It was just funny, man. It was just fun.
Yeah, man. It sounds like a lot of fun, man. But it also sounds, you know, to wonder how anyone got out of that era with between the third rail and, I mean, the environment on the streets. It just sounds like very dangerous. But I guess it is a lot of fun too.
A lot of times I got raided, and I would leave if my piece was unfinished, and I would wait a few hours, go back and finish it.
Yeah, for sure.
Cop a raid and that's it. They go home for the night. If they don't catch nobody, sometimes, you know, you're in the yard. You know, one time was in the D yard. It was like probably 1981, and it was a bunch of us, like me, Rex 167, this dude Break 4, Lee 3, Has, Pro. It was like probably 10 riders. And it was snowing, and the yard was filled with snow. It was just, we were just bombing insides. And it was weird. A 4 train came in with like just 4 cars, and it stopped just like right in front of the D train that we was bombing. And people just start looking at each other. And half of us were just so fucked up on weed. We were just like, oh, it's probably just, you know, train pulling in and out. So I'm fucked up. I was fucked up on weed. I'm still bombed, but I'm looking out the window. Next thing you know, the doors open and you see cops jump out of that shit. It was crazy. Yeah, they just jumped. It was about probably 6 cops jumped out of the fucking train, and they raided the whole. I remember a few riders got caught that night, because there was a few riders from Brooklyn. I don't remember clearly who it was. And I know some got caught, some from the Bronx got caught. And it was crazy, because we didn't even think any cops would roll up in the yard on a Sunday when it was snowing. That was such a bugged out raid, and it was really ill. They came out, they jumped out, and they had the yard surrounded because they had cops outside too. Because I remember we tried to go out this other hole and we saw cops there. We had to back up and run. I remember I had to run all the way to the front of the yard, because there's a yard. The front of the yard is the tunnel connects to the station in the tunnel underground, Bedford Park on the concourse. So I had to walk the tunnel to get away. That's how I got away. It was either that or forget it. Sometimes they will have the place really surrounded. Like, you better think of something fast, because they got every exit, everything surrounded.
And I guess the police around that time in New York City had a reputation for being, you know, a bit untoward, especially towards, I imagine, the minorities, you know, the communities that you come from, and the people that were probably doing graffiti as well, man. It would have been pretty terrifying to run into 6 or 7 of them at once.
Oh, they'll fuck you up.
Yeah,
they'll
man.
fuck you. They'll fuck you up. They fuck you up. I got caught tagging on train stations with a marker, like, and they'll just like come. They'll just grab you, bring you to the room in the train station, and next you know, as soon as they take you in, you're getting fucking punched in the head, kicked in the back, and you just crawl up. And you writing on my train station, you fucking little prick. And niggas just fucking me down, and then, you know, they beat you down a little, take your fucking marker, spray can, and kick you in the ass and tell you, get the fuck. I catch you on the station. Some cops are cool like that. They'll fuck you up. I'd rather take the beat down and go through the system and get a charge, go to see the judge. It was like that too, selling weed at one time. You know, I used to sell weed, I would get caught, and the cops would take my weed and money and fucking slap me up and tell me, get the fuck out of here. And I would just leave. And you know, and then, yeah, the cops were crazy, man. They were really ill. I've got slapped up and kicked up, punched in the head many times.
With the amount of shit you were doing, man, they must have had your name on a fucking dartboard, you know? You must have been a big target to a lot of the local police.
Big time.
Yeah, man. Were people painting, and you'll have to excuse me if, you know, it's sort of a silly question, but aside from the trains, back in those early years, were people painting on the train tracks, on the walls, doing track sides and things like that?
Yeah, some people were doing train tracks. There were writers doing it. I'm not sure. I mean, not sure exactly who. I remember Mitch 77 had, when I was doing trains in the early 80s, he had pieces on the tracks. He had pieces on the house tracks, on the houses on the tracks. You know, dudes were doing pieces. You know, you had Fuzz One had pieces, Band Two had pieces. You know, dudes were not just doing trains; they were doing tracks too. Track One, OTB. You know, he had pieces on tracks, so they would do pieces on the tracks too.
Yeah, man. And was there a period of time, you know, I've heard stories, there was a period of time where they sort of quote unquote cleaned up New York City. Was there a specific year, or was it in the 80s or the 90s or further down the track, where they got rid of graffiti, or they attempted to get rid of graffiti in the city and started cleaning all the trains and cleaning the inside, and had that whole, I guess they had a bit of a marketing campaign around cleaning up the city. Was that an actual thing, or was that sort of blown up in the media?
No, they really did. They painted all the trains white. They painted them all white, and people thought it was over. But people started doing throw-ups and tags. And I remember a scene in Blade smashed the 2s and 5s with big tags. And me and Cone started to hit the 2 and the 5 line really hard when they were white. Back in, like, you could say late 82 into 83. They started painting all the trains white. And people started doing pieces and burners. And I was like, wow, it's coming back, you know, and before you know it, the trains were destroyed again. You know, white trains were destroyed. People were doing pieces and whole cars and top to bottoms. And they pretty much stood bombed. And then probably the mid 80s, they started painting them green and burgundy. And then the flats, the BMTs, they were bombed. They were like the last ones being bombed until like 87, 88. I started to bomb those lines because they were still being bombed. And then before you know it, they had started coming all these new trains coming in. I guess the Japanese made some trains for New York called the Kawasaki trains that were digital, the IRTs. And then all these new trains started coming in, and there was no more. That was it. In the late 80s, all the graffiti trains were done. It was over. They had all the digital trains, and the new trains came out. And even writers from those days were still trying to piece a little on the clean trains. But the thing was, you had to take a picture because it would probably just run to the yard if you hit it in the layup, and you would just catch it rolling or catch a picture, and it was getting buffed right away.
Mm. Yeah, was there yards? I guess you didn't, you know, yeah, you had to work pretty hard to get a flick even because it wouldn't run in service. Was there yards for scrap trains where they would get old trains and chuck them in? Did you ever go into any of those and spend a few nights?
Oh yeah, there was one yard called the scrap yard in Brooklyn. Man, they were putting them all there. And I used to hear about it. I'm like, I'm not going over there hitting no scrap trains. But then I was pictures and I was like, wow, this is cool. And I heard it was just dead. Like no cops were going there, nobody cared. And they were all the trains in there. So I started to go in there, and like probably the early 90s, I started going in there and doing pieces, and it felt cool. Because I mean the train ain't running, but it was still a train that was running, and it's an old vintage train. It was like an old car you like. And I was like, wow, look at this train. It's an old train with the round windows. And then, you know, the windows were still up. And the one thing I regret is not taking panels from the inside. They had old tags. And I would say I should take some of these panels. But then I'm like, Dan, you have to screw them off, get on the train or get on a car, go all the way home with them shits. And I didn't really like stress it, but I wanted to do it. And some writers did. And now they have some panels with old Dondi tags on it, you know, crazy. Like I remember seeing that stuff and always wanting to take some of the panels on the inside, and all you needed was a screwdriver and just take it off and take it home. But I was like, what the fuck I'm gonna do with a tag, with a panel with an old Dondi tag on it, Band 2, or who Zephyr on it. But now you think about it, you look at it, you're like, wow, that thing would have been an ill piece in your collection right now that you could probably even sell to a museum later or lend it to a museum, you know. But
I mean, what are you going to do though? Carry something around for 15, 20 years, 30 years. It's hard, man, because yeah, there's a lot of those things you think, fuck, I wish I had that. But yeah, it's hard to see that.
Big time. I regret that. That's the only thing I regret about not doing in the scrapyard.
Is it true they dropped a lot of those trains in the ocean? Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, they were piling them up on the big ass boats, and I heard they were using them for reefs for the fish, so they, deep in the ocean, they were dumping them. I was like, wow, that's crazy, man.
That is crazy, man.
You could see them shits, like fucking piles of them, and they're just dumping them in the ocean, deep out in the ocean. That's kind of crazy.
It is crazy, man. Maybe someone could scuba dive down and get some of those panels that they forgot to get back in the day. Scrape the barnacles off.
The salt sea salt probably all that shit up by now.
Yeah, 100%, man. You've got a new, you've got a new book out. Can you tell me about your book, man, and when you started that project, and where can people find it, most importantly?
Oh, it's called COPE2 Greatness. It's a book One Space Gallery did here in New York. You can go to onespace.com, and it's a limited edition of 2,000 copies. It's a really great book. It has a little bit of trains, throw ups. It was more basically with my exhibition Greatness. So they wanted to do a book, a little book with me. So we did it. It was cool. I got some great photos in there. It's a really great. Some people crying it's expensive, $200, but it's a limited edition book, and it once it's gone, it's gone. I've just finished another book with Schiffer Books, and it's coming out in May of 2022. That book's insane. That book's phenomenal. It has it goes in chapters. It has throw-ups around the world, burners around the world, trains around the world. It has collaborations from around the world and with big artists. It has gallery shots from around the world. It's a little bit of everything that I've done in one book. And that book is it's gonna be a killer, and I'm working on another book called Action Shots, which is, because I used to take photos too from a lot of writers from like the late 80s, not the whole 90s, when I used to do walls. I would take shots of them painting. So I got so many photos. It's insane. I got like bins and bins of photos. And I'm like, damn, imagine like doing books with this stuff. And books they're cool to make, so that way people can have a little piece of your work and your history.
Yeah, 100%, man. $200 is fuck all, man. You can spend $200 on a night out easy. So yeah, looking forward to all of those, man. So tell me, man, what kind of form is your art taking these days? Yesterday, for example, or last week, besides the books, of course, that you're working on. What are you doing? Are you working in studios? Are you exhibiting? I've seen you're pretty busy. What's happening at the moment?
Yeah, I'm pretty much working on a lot of pieces for exhibitions for next year, and in the States, hopefully Japan, Tokyo, Hong Kong. It's just because the COVID really messed a lot of things up. I had exhibitions all around, but when the COVID came last year, it just put everything on hold. So it's backed up, but now for next year, it'll start happening again. So I have a bunch of solo exhibitions coming up for next year. I have some even booked to 2023, so a lot of these galleries, they book exhibitions a year ahead. So I have a lot of great, I'm more into like focused on just doing shows, and I sell a lot anyway from home. My shop online, my cope2art.com. I sell so much on my site. Every day I'm selling. Instagram, I sell so much through Instagram. It's pretty it's a blessing, man. I'm pretty grateful and thankful, to God for blessing me with this art form and able to live, good and take this to another level. Because at the end of the day, it's all him making it happen, man. He's blessed me, to live off this and feed my family and pay the bills and do what I gotta do and leave some type of legacy behind in the end of the day, and that's basically what I do. I live off my name for the past 20 years, but the past 10 years has been really, really phenomenal. And it's only gotten bigger. with the art, selling paintings. I had a painting in Sotheby's in September. That was insane. I've never been in Sotheby's, and I had a painting and it sold. And, I have so much going with the artwork, but I still always manage to do pieces in the hood. I'll do trains around in Europe if I can, because it's in the blood, it's in the soul. It's hard not to. I went to Paris this summer and I had to do a metro. So many subway cars. I'm taking the train in Paris. I'm seeing panels roll up. I'm like, wow. So I had to do one, and I did one, and it was crazy. I'm like, damn, I'm in the mid-50s and I'm painting trains still. It's hard to break it for a real graffiti purist. Like, I just love it. I do it for me, for fun. I don't care. I can go do a piece on a train, take a picture, and I love it. Just the excitement of it, the energy of it, it's just always there. And doing a throw up in the hood or on the street, I do it in the daytime. I just see a spot, I'll get out the car, look around. It takes me a minute or two. I'll do a quick throw up, and I do it just for fun because I love to do it. It's not about being king anymore or this, that. I did that. I did everything. So now it's all for fun, and for business.
Fucking oath, man. Well, listen, Cope, man, to say this was an honor would be the biggest of understatements, man. You've truly been a hero of mine since my early teens, man, when I found my love for graffiti and for art as well. And to get the opportunity to talk to you, man, was, I'm really grateful, and it was a huge accomplishment for me to be able to spend some time with you and chat, man. So I can't thank you enough.
Thank you, brother. And I really honor you as a human being, man. And I hope to get out there and we can have a beer together.
Man, you got to come down to Australia, brother.
Get out there, man. Trust me. Next year, I'm going to try. Hopefully this COVID crap goes away. I can get out there. And I got to make Australia. I've been dying to get to Sydney, Brisbane, and even get over to New Zealand. I had a few out there in the past years, but I didn't go. I always had some, personal issues, fucked up my trips. But this next year, I'm going to try to squeeze out there. Even if I go, it doesn't even have to be for an exhibition. I just want to go to chill, to have fun, paint walls and just chill out.
Yeah, man. Well, I can tell you, you'd be welcome with open arms, man, because there's a huge community here. And guys like yourself, man, you're a hero to a lot of us.
Thank you, brother. Peace.
Thank you for listening to the Lead Poison Podcast.
talking to me? Oh yeah? Huh? Okay.
Huh?